This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to a podcast of Rare Antiquities, episode 14. Today we will talk about the Coen Brothers cult comedy film, Raising Arizona, starring Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter. My name is Harry, and I'll be your host for today's show.
And I am Geoff. I will be your co-host.
So Geoff, this is the first Nicolas Cage movie we're doing for the podcast, and if we're lucky, it won't be the last, but this is also, we're doing a Coen Brothers movie. I know you really like the Coen Brothers, and you've mentioned you hadn't seen this one before, so that surprises me. Since we always reminisce about the topical movie in question at the start of each podcast, do you have any memories about the existence of Raising Arizona? Or maybe if you don't, or if you don't have much information there, how about you let us know your thoughts on the Coen Brothers and what you find so interesting about their work?
I don't have a lot of memory of the film. I was aware of its existence. I had an idea of the general plot. I don't know that I was aware that this was a Coen Brothers movie, for a long time. It never really crossed my radar. It sounded kind of goofy. You just listen to the synopsis. It sounded kind of goofy. So never really captured my interest. As far as the Coen Brothers go, I don't love all of their movies, but there are a few of their films that I really, really do enjoy. They really like to tell the crime story, right? So that, often their stories deal with criminals or some type of investigations. Often their protagonists are half-baked idiots, not always, but often. So they take some tropes and they play with them. They do different things with them. They're not the most conventional filmmakers, so which I appreciate. Their humor is always very layered. It's very intelligent humor without being snobby. So, those are some of the things that I really dig about them. And they're very good writers as well. Their, dialogue is always spot on. So I haven't seen all of their movies, but I've seen most of them now. And it's, it's nice to kind of go back and experience one of these for the first time.
It's good to know. Yeah, for me, I'm not really too much of a Coen Brothers fan. I agree. I think their writing is fairly strong, but I think in terms of the finished product of a movie, I find a lot of their work slightly overrated. I seem to mostly get what topic or even maybe lack of topic they're trying to, point at or make fun of, or what commentary they're trying to make. I just find, especially when it comes to some of their humor, I find it not to be that funny. I think I prefer a little bit more of their serious works. So let's see if it applies to Raising Arizona here. I don't want to give out my thoughts too early. See if Raising Arizona is different. And I'm curious to see how this movie stacks up for you in terms of the standard of Coen Brothers for you. I did watch this movie a very long time ago when I was young, and I don't have a lot of memories about it, aside from the fact that Nicolas Cage had a baby. I seem to recall he was kind of a hipster doofus kind of guy, but that was back in the 80s. And I really recall my cousin, older cousin, really raved about this film. And so I have some vague recollection that I liked this movie when I was young, so I was interested in watching it again since it had been so long. But before we get into the movie, I do want to briefly touch upon the Cage. Nick Cage. The Cage, yes. Yeah. So the question, what are your thoughts on the Cage?
Overall?
Overall, just, say what's on the top of your head there.
Oh, Nick Cage is all kinds of shit crazy, isn't he? And don't get the wrong idea. I've always been a fan. I actually think he's a very talented actor. He's very unique. There isn't anybody who looks like him. There isn't anybody who performs like him. He's done some really interesting projects over his career. I guess what comes to the top of mind is wasted potential. And the reason I say that is because it seemed like, right when his career was really taken off, like late 90s, early 2000s, and things just took a wrong turn. It's really unfortunate because he was starting to do some good stuff. We've talked about The Rock a couple of times. He's kind of zany in that movie, but that was the type of film that was, really launching him into the stratosphere. She followed up with Con Air, which a lot of people like, and I think is a bag of shit. And then after that, he didn't really do a lot. And, obviously the financial troubles that he got himself into, he couldn't pay, he had to, and he still does. He has to take everything that comes across his desk. And that's really unfortunate because I think he could have been a much bigger star than he ended up being.
I put some thought into this, and I think Nicolas Cage is 1/3 of my spirit animal.
What are the other 2/3 of your spirit animal?
No, Shatner and Avery Brooks, of course.
I see. Okay. That's one fierce 3-headed beast.
Oh, yes. Doesn't explain a lot, though.
It explains a lot. I hope that creature has the sideburns that those 3 men would, at least 2 of those men would demand.
I agree with you. I think it's a bit unfortunate. I think he is actually a brilliant actor who has a lot of range. He doesn't have the restraint is one way of looking at it, but he's not afraid to really let his emotions go while he's making a movie. It seems like he pours his entire heart and soul into making a movie, whether it's a A-list movie or, the most dog shit movie you've ever seen that goes straight to video on demand or whatever. And I agree with you. I think because, he was getting a lot of money. He got into, buying all these castles and comic books and then all these other things. He got into money trouble and he owes a lot of money to the IRS and he lost a lot. So I think he's just in the last decade. I agree. I think after the early 2000s, I think the last 10, 12 years, he's just been making shit movie after shit movie because he's just desperate to get himself out of this trouble. And when you're talking about movies that probably are offering a lot of money, they're probably like, if you want to make a small independent dramatic film that can kind of, do something different and stretch your interest, you're not going to be paid a lot of money. But if you're going to be making some other shit movies, they'll throw $5 million at one guy like Nicolas Cage and, the dog shit to the rest, and the movie's dog shit.
Yeah.
So that's probably what he's trying to do since then. And he's also getting older too. So I'm sure he's not getting the A-list invites anymore, which is a real shame because I agree. He is an actor who has a lot of range, and I like a lot of his dramatic roles from the 80s and 90s. And I think he's a fantastic actor in my opinion. I always enjoy watching Nicolas Cage in anything, even if it's a shit movie.
He never mails it in. He's always, as you said, he pours everything into it. And he has had some really, really good roles. Even in movies that are kind of so-so, he's had some good roles in some of those movies. I kind of hope that he'll find his way out of this financial quagmire and have, a bit of a second career, like a John Travolta or a Mickey Rourke or something. I hope maybe, a couple of years he'll sort of come back around and we'll get to see the Cage of old. If he hasn't already lost his goddamn mind.
I want Face Off too, man. I want Face Off too.
Oh my God.
Cage versus Cage.
Oh man. Whose face is he taking
his own
off?
His own.
And it's just his face underneath?
Yes.
Oh man, sign me up. I'm standing in line for that right now. Oh my God. That was great.
All right. Do you have any other early thoughts before we dive into this, or should I go right into the plot summary?
Let's unleash the beast.
All right. Welcome to the Rock. Nowhere, Arizona. Here we meet Hy McDonough, played by Nicolas Cage, a convenience store robber who seems to be a fan of the Bill Murray comedy Groundhog Day, as we are shown him continually getting arrested and released from jail from numerous robberies, always promising to reform. Well, actually, he promises not to reform, but that doesn't matter to the parole board in Nowhere, Arizona, nor does it matter to Petty Officer Edwina, also referred to as Ed, played by Holly Hunter. You see, Ed's fiancée dumped her, probably because his name was Ed too, so when Hy realizes she's free, Hy expresses his true feelings to her in the South Passage. Ed promises to wait for Hy's eventual release from what must be Sideshow Bob's rotating door prison entrance. When Hy does get released, they get married and move into their desert mobile home, and Hy surprisingly gets a real job at a machine shop. They want to start a family, but after trying for a bit, Ed realizes she cannot have children as she is infertile, and they cannot adopt a child because of Hy's dubious past as a criminal. Things seem to be doomed for the star-crossed lovers. But wait, Apu Nahasa Pita... a locally famous furniture store owner, Nathan, Arizona, and his wife announced they have quintuplets. For those that need further explanation, that means 5 babies. So Hy, being an expert at stealing and obviously not getting caught, decides with Ed that they should kidnap 1 baby, because 4 will be enough for the real parents. After what seems to be a Maggie Simpson Beast storyline from a recent Simpsons episode, Hy eventually is able to kidnap a newborn, the one named Nathan Jr. Hy and Ed return home and seem to be out of the woods, but soon they are eventually visited by Hy's recently escaped prison cellmates Gale and Evil Snoats. Ed wants them gone, but Hi is more generous, allowing them to stay for a longer visit. All the while, the Snoats are trying to convince Hi to rob a bank. If that is not enough for Hi to deal with, he also has to deal with the fact that he punched out his immoral supervisor, Glenn, for suggesting they wipe swap to keep things interesting in Nowhere, Arizona. Hi seems to be frustrated, feeling the pressure of his life being in disarray, so while shopping for diapers, he habitually and spontaneously steals them, leading to a foot chase with the cops. Hi manages to elude them, but Ed is none too pleased. The next day, Glenn returns, black eye and all, still reeling, but now threatens Hi as he comes to the realization that their magical child's first name must either be Kal-El or is in fact the missing Nathan Jr. Glenn gives Hi an ultimatum for Hi to turn himself in, or he will go to the cops, and he leaves. However, Gale and Evil overhear the conversation and turn on Hi, as there is a cash reward for someone finding Nathan Jr. The Snoats are able to tie Hi up, and they take Nathan Jr. However, before turning over Nathan Jr., they somehow fall in love with him on the car ride, so they decide to keep the boy for themselves. In their first act as self-imposed parents, they head towards a bank they intend to rob. Meanwhile, a leather-clad biker bounty hunter named Leonard Smalls approaches Nathan in Arizona and tries to make a deal to find the baby for $50,000. Nathan actually believes his bounty hunter is the man responsible for kidnapping the baby, so the bounty hunter leaves with the intention of still finding the baby and selling him on the black market. Hi has actually been having nightmares about this bounty hunter in his dreams, so it looks like it's 1, 2, Leonard's coming for you. When we see Gale and Evil rob the bank, but they seem to have forgotten the baby on the road back to at the bank for some reason. On the way back to the bank's anti-theft dye canisters explode and they are incapacitated. Hi and Ed arrive at the bank, as Hi has assumed that is where the Snoats are headed. But instead of finding the Snoats, they see the bounty hunter there, and a small chase ensues. Hi and the bounty hunter eventually face off, and Hi is able to pull a pin on a grenade attached to the bounty hunter's vest, and the bounty hunter explodes. Hi and Ed decide they should not be together. It would not be good parents after all, so they return Nathan Jr. back at the Arizona's home. Nathan Sr. catches them as they are returning the baby, but he goes easy on them as he understands their predicament of not being able to conceive a baby themselves and does not call the police. He also provides some advice to the couple, telling them to sleep on it before actually splitting up. That night in his dreams, Hi dreams that Gale and Evil return to prison and reform, that Glenn gets his due for being an ass, that Nathan Jr. grows up to be a high school football player, and that Hi and Ed do remain together. The movie closes with Hi's dream of him and Ed being grandparents, and their many children and grandchildren come and visit them around the holidays, and all is well. The end. So Jeff, as per usual, give me your initial high-level thoughts here based off this plot synopsis. Yeah,
it certainly sounds sort of like a zany heist movie, with some interesting character elements. There's a lot of plot here. Like when you listen to the synopsis, it sounds like there's a lot going on. Again, it doesn't, as a lot of the movies we talk about on the show, there's a lot more under the surface here than what we're going. But I think if you were to go through that as a comedy, I'm interested. I think there's probably some potential for some laughs here.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say if someone would read that to me just based off that, it would sound like an 80s comedy. A typical 80s comedy. No, I don't think it's something I'd really see today, unless it was on video for demand or something like that. Direct-to-DVD type of movie. But yeah, I think from the 80s, this is the type of comedy that would have been thrown out there, for sure. Yeah. So how about, before we get into the nitty-gritty details, I'll hit you with some trivia. So the movie was released in 1987, and this was the Coen Brothers' second movie. They wanted to make a movie that was a complete 180 with respect to their previous movie, Blood Simple. They wanted something more optimistic and upbeat this time. The budget for this movie was $5 million. Upon release, it was a modest hit, and it actually made $23 million, which, again, back in 1987 was fairly decent for a low-budget movie such as this. The movie launched the careers of all the main players in the movie: Nicolas Cage, Holly Hunter, John Goodman, William Forsythe, and Frances McDormand. In fact, McDormand was a girlfriend of Joel Coen, and they eventually got married, and she has appeared in other Coen Brother movies along the likes of Hunter and Goodman. Cage, in the same year as this one, also made Moonstruck with Cher, and that was a romantic comedy, and that cemented his status as a leading actor in Hollywood back in the late 80s. The bounty hunter's name, actor who played the bounty hunter, his name's Randall Cobbs, I believe. Yeah, he is actually a former boxer. You could tell from his face pretty much. And he used to compete in the heavyweight division, actually. If he looks familiar to you, it's because he's made some other small appearances in film. Like I think he did a Police Academy movie, Ace Ventura, Naked Gun, and the Jim Carrey movie Liar Liar. These aren't definitely not the creme de la creme of the movies we are referencing here, but maybe you recognize him. He also did some small TV shows in the 80s and 90s, did like a couple episodes of X-Files, but I don't think he's really been in anything since 2001. It seems to be he's retired. Another interesting fact here is the cinematographer is Barry Sonnenfeld. He became a director, and you probably recognize him from his Men in Black movies. The initial reviews for this film were very mixed, but since then it has become more of a cult black comedy, and recent retrospective reviews are giving it a lot more praise than what it initially got upon release. According to what I have read through my research, the relationship between Nicolas Cage and the Coen brothers was also not very pleasant. Cage wanted a bit more involvement in the dialogue and had some other ideas for the character and the story, but the Coen brothers didn't allow any deviation to their dialogue and vision. So from my research, that also seems to be kind of the case with the Coen brothers themselves. Even to this day, it wasn't just because it was Nicolas Cage. That's just them. In an interview, like an actor studio interview or something like that, Cage said the only thing he was able to provide creative input on was his hair, which definitely is a character onto itself in this film. And finally, one last little neat piece of trivia is every single character in this movie eventually breaks into tears or cries a little. The only character that does not do that is the baby. So I found that quite interesting. So Jeff, based on some of that trivia, any comments, anything that stood out for you, or do you want to head straight into the movie?
Well, what I thought was interesting, and I am absolutely not surprised to hear this, is the lockdown that the Coen brothers have on their dialogue. So I am not surprised that, they looked Nicolas Cage deep in his soulless, bottomless black eyes and, fuck right off with his dialogue suggestions, because he's crazy. And that's the linchpin of every single film they make, is the dialogue. So I could definitely see that. I'll tell you this, I wouldn't have the guts to stare down the Cage. So good for those guys. They got some cojones.
No, cojones. No, they're stupid. You always listen to the Cage. That's my motto.
It would be a different movie, that's for sure.
As I said, man, I have to listen to my spirit animal. So,
Well, my guess is that he probably had a lot of creative and dialogue input on Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, and we're going to see how that turned out. So
never saw it, but it's on my list.
Oh my God.
Let's do that in the future.
Pause the podcast. Let's do Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. A man peeing fire. You will never see it again.
Well, no, I'd see it multiple times if that's the case. All right, so how about we get anything else, or should we get right into here?
Oh, let's roll, man.
All right, so the opening act of the movie. So the first thing I kind of wanted to ask you and talk about is the one unique thing here is the entire opening sequence. It's quite long, and it's really a mix of High narrating his rotating life in and out of prison, how he met Ed, them showing to get married and their desires for a family, and then the tragedy of Ed being infertile. Then this narration continues as they realize that Nathan Arizona has the quintuplets, and I believe they're labeled the Arizona Quints, and then they go off on their decision to kidnap one of the babies to raise as their own child. Then as they're leaving and riding off into the sunset, I believe, with that ladder on their car, intending to kidnap the kid, then, the Raising Arizona opening credits, the title card comes there, and you get the initial score there, and the yodeling, which is the main kind of theme, and we could talk about that later. But what did you think about this whole introduction and the narration with High here? Did you like it? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this was one of my favorite parts of the whole movie, in fact, was the opening. I think it's 12 or 13 minutes before the title card even comes up. As you said, sort of the Groundhog Day quality of this revolving door, convict here. I mean, he just does not have any other way to live his life. And yet he's so, I don't know what the right term is, docile even. His guns aren't loaded, which we find out. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. And yet, like, this life of crime is all that he's good for. And what I thought was a really neat point there, and it doesn't really have too much bearing on the overall story or the plot, but I thought it was an interesting commentary on the American justice system, is, every time he's sitting before the parole board and he's just telling them what they want to hear. And it's like, kind of like they know it and he knows it, but they let him out anyway, right? So, there's this question on the justice system, the prison system. Is this incarceration for revenge, or is it incarceration for rehabilitation? Like they just don't get it. Like the parole board, they sit there, they don't get it at all. They keep letting the guy out. They hear what they want to hear. And
it's Colonel Sanders who's on the parole board there, and he goes, okay then.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You'll be arrested if you do this again. He goes, I understand. Okay then, you're good to go. Yeah, I think it's a commentary. I don't know if it's a commentary on the American legal system partially, but it might also be commentary. I know Arizona's not really, is it classified as a Midwestern state, even though it's not really I guess.
Southwestern, I think.
Southwestern. So I don't know, those mid states, maybe it's a commentary of the kind of people there, or maybe they rely on these prisoners for jobs. Like, it's, as part of their economy, you got a police, law enforcement, judges, lawyers, parole board people here, security guards, all these kind of things they rely on. There's nothing else in these states that produce a lot of stuff for the economy, unless, certain places, have wheat and corn and shit like that. But I mean, some of these places in the middle of the desert, what do they fucking produce? Dick all. So what's their economy? That's the way I was kind of looking at it. It's kind of like they're poking fun that they have to let these people go and commit more crimes so they can have people maintain jobs in the way of life. That's just the way of life for them. So
yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I never thought of that, but that totally makes sense. Yeah, there's nothing else. They're in the desert, and like many Coen Brothers movies, takes place in sort of in the middle of nowhere, some backwater place, and that's all that going on there.
You got the blue meth, or Heisenberg blue, or we're gonna be doing this. So what's your?
Could you put the cage on some blue meth and get yourself a bag of popcorn?
Yes,
that would be something else. I do want to mention the voiceover provided by Nicolas Cage, which again is another, Coen Brothers technique that's used in many of their films there. His accent's a little weird at first, but it really starts to grow on me. I think he does a really good job with this voiceover. Voiceovers are really, really tough to pull off, and I don't think people really realize how tough they are. I mean, the actor doesn't have any other opportunity to emote, right? It's just the voice. So he's got to make sure he's telling the story just through the voice. Obviously, the dialogue has to be top notch, which I'd say it is. But I thought you did a really good job with this here. You really got a sense of his character and just how it's almost a helplessness to me. Like he's caught in this cycle, as we've talked about. I think he really captured the hopelessness of this cycle that, eventually they do try to break. But I think that was a great introduction to the character.
Yeah. And again, maybe it's he's a product of his surroundings, right? Because there's nothing else there. Maybe that's a point of American society. And we'll get to that at the end there, the product of his surroundings, because I think the end kind of maybe indicating that that's what the Coen brothers are going for, just in a theory of mine. I'll just give you some other thoughts here. I mean, the first note that I actually wrote down was the bird's nest on the top of Nicolas Cage's head, High's head. I love it. I love that hair. It's a character all on its own. Unfortunately, I guess birds have plucked it all out of his head after this movie's been done, and he's replaced it with a dead beaver, but that's another story. And I love the nickname Highs. We've talked about, you want to see Nick Cage on drugs. Well, I mean, Nick Cage is high. So I know it's H-I, but I thought it was always a little appropriate. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, what did you think of this scene as part of the narration when he declares his love for her just spontaneously? And they actually get engaged during his latest fingerprinting session.
Yeah.
I thought it was charming and unique. I mean, if real life couples can get engaged during sporting events in front of other spectators and strangers, why not someone while they're getting fingerprinted? But did that humor work for you, or did it not?
Well, it kind of goes, it fits into the Coen brothers' normal sense of humor, which isn't necessarily laugh out loud funny. The comedy there is still effective in the sense that it's an absurd situation. We're seeing, this joining together of these opposites, right? You get the crook and the cop, they're literally on opposite sides of this fingerprinting table. It was appropriate, story-wise for them to do it this way. I didn't laugh, but it helps create the world that we're going to be living in for the next 90 minutes too. It's not our world that we're living in. We're living in this weird place. Yeah.
It's unique and charming. And I agree with you. I think this whole opening sequence that lasts about 15 minutes long is probably one of the stronger points of the movie for me. I really enjoyed, and I was really along for the ride in this first 15, 20 minutes here. We'd already talked about the unique and quirky dialogue. And I think the dialogue is fairly strong through the whole movie here. I wanted to point out one thing. He says when Ed's infertile and they're at the doctor's office, he says, I wrote this down, her insides are a rocky place where his seed can find no purchase.
Yeah.
So, it's funny because I think I read the Coen brothers were kind of influenced by a lot of Southern literature, William Faulkner tales, and even the Bible. I think they took a lot of that kind of reserved, hippie, redneck type of dialogue and converted it or perverted it into this movie. And it's quite unique. And I do enjoy some of the lines in this movie. And I think one of the reasons why this movie has generated a cult following is because of some of the unique lines in this movie. That's from what I gather reading on the internet. A lot of people like this movie because of the quotes you can take away from it. Mm-hmm. So just thought I'd get that out. I also wrote down, when the first thought I'd said is when they, on the TV, when the Arizonas had the quintuplets and they named them the Arizona Quints, first thing that popped in my mind was a redneck version, even more redneck version of Quint from Jaws. It's like, hoopah, the starboard, ain't ya watching it? Okay, then. so I just wrote that down. I thought that was quite interesting. And then the last bit here, as this opening sequence rounds out, is I wanted to talk about the score. You get when the title card comes out and you get the yodeling and the banjo. What are your impressions of the score here? Did you enjoy it? Was it appropriate?
I thought it was both appropriate and yes, I did enjoy it. It certainly fits with the movie. I mean, it evokes everything about the movie, and it's kind of a highbrow redneck type of music, which is what I wrote down for the dialogue. Everybody sort of speaks sophisticated redneck in this area, right?
Yeah,
yeah. No, I thought it was good, man. I thought it was a really good score. It totally fits.
It does. It's also fun and quirky. Yeah. But yeah, I couldn't listen to this over and over again, but it fits in this movie. But the question I have is, when you use this kind of music and this choice of music, is it not a stereotype onto itself? Is the score prejudiced?
That's interesting, man, because I guess the answer is both yes and no. I mean, they are playing with stereotypes here. So is it stereo? I mean, are they gonna play Mozart? Is that going to fit? Is John Williams doing the score for this movie? I don't think so. They have to still put the movie in its geographical place and in time as well. And this is how you do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is it stereotypical? Is it racist in itself? I don't think so.
Okay. No, I just thought I'd bring it up to see.
What do you think?
I think they're definitely playing the stereotype card here. But you mean, I don't know, if they're playing to rednecks that's part of the target audience, are they making fun of rednecks, or is that the target audience?
I'd say they're making fun of rednecks. They're not the target. Because target, they wouldn't get it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then it's prejudiced. That's my definition. If I just see you just throw a brown guy into a North American movie from Hollywood and all of a sudden his theme is just Indian music, is that not racist and prejudiced?
It depends on the context, I would say.
Depends on the context. Yeah, I agree. But what happens, if this guy wants nothing to do with it? Just a regular Joe, a banker, dressed in a, Armani suit and Gucci shoes, and they show him strutting down, Wall Street and playing, his theme is Indian music. Is that not prejudiced? I would assume so.
Well, that would be prejudiced. But so again, that comes down to the context,
comes down to the context. But so here, if the rednecks are not the target audience, I would say it's prejudiced. But they're making fun of it. But that's okay. That's the satirical joke here.
Yeah, I guess that's right. So that's the joke. Oh man, I don't know. Can you make fun of an ethnic group, or you can't call rednecks an ethnic group because the term itself.
Well, that's why I'm not saying racist. I'm saying prejudiced.
Well, then I guess you'd have to say the whole movie's prejudiced, then, wouldn't you?
Maybe. It's quite possible.
But again, the Coens. They often take idiots as the protagonists of their films, and to play to comedic effect. And part of what's interesting when they do that is they kind of show you it's like a magic trick, right? They show you the one thing. They're like, look over here. And then, you get the redneck music and the redneck dialogue and all that stuff. And you're looking there, but really all the magic's happening underneath there, where it's actually very heartfelt and intelligent type of movie. So hard to say that it's prejudice. They're kind of using that to play to the audience's built-in prejudice in order to, sucker punch them with the magic that's coming underneath.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I understand. Well, so we'll see how that plays out. So how about we move on? We both agree the score is unique and charming. Mm-hmm. So now the next scene here is we get to the baby stealing scene where High is using that ladder to get into the second floor of the Arizona household to steal the baby. And here we get a very long scene of him trying to steal one baby. It all goes wrong for him. Coen's here trying to create a humorous scene here and probably show that High himself is not experienced dealing with children and has a lack of intelligence about him as well. And my question to you is does any of this work for you?
No. Well, yeah, some of it works, but I'm enjoying the character work at this point here. I mean, they've got this half-baked idea to go off half-cocked and kidnap this kid. They're just acting out of instinct, out of emotion. They haven't thought this through. They wouldn't even know how to think this thing through. No. Like their scheme to rip off a kid is get a ladder, climb in the window, and grab him. I don't know. I mean, maybe that kind of goes back to what we were talking about. I mean, there's a couple of idiots, really, and they're responding to their intense desire to have a kid. So I think it's working as character development from a plot perspective. It's a bit of a stretch, even in this strange world of this fictional Arizona.
For me, I feel that the scene drags out way too long. Humor falls a bit flat here. I mean, I do enjoy Nicolas Cage in this scene in a couple of moments. I mean, I love how he kind of pushes, he's already dealing with a baby who's already crawling around everywhere on the floor. Another one gets up. I think he pushes another baby down kind of rough.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. And I think Cage pulled it off. So did the baby. And again, shows Cage's lack of intelligence and experience here. But yeah, you can't seem to get a handle on all of it. And eventually several of them get loose. And I didn't really like much of what I saw here. It just becomes something I think that they're just going for, again, because they said that their previous movie was so dark. I mean, I don't know anything about Blood Simple, but they're saying they wanted to make something more fun and quirky and optimistic and a comedy here. I think they just threw this in and forced the comedy here, but it really didn't work too much for me. The one thing I did like, though, is all the baby names in that one massive crib.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed what the wife was reading. Dr. Spock's Baby and Childcare. So
yeah,
I chuckled at that. I have no idea if they're throwing that in there as a reference to Star Trek or not, but
no, that's a real book.
Dr. Spock?
Yeah, that's a real person.
Who the fuck is Dr. Spock?
I don't know. A psychologist. I believe this Dr. Spock person put it into the Google machine, man. And
I can't do it. I'm recording. You got to do it for me.
Yeah, that's not a Star Trek reference at all.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right.
He was a pediatrician.
Dr. Spock. Okay.
And he published light. He's very famous. Yeah. Obviously not famous enough because you haven't heard of him, but
he fails on all levels because it didn't reach.
Yeah. Fail. Yeah. You're the second guy to be called Spock in the public consciousness. So
he doesn't.
Sorry, buddy.
There's only one.
You lose.
He loses.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So then they nab the baby. They escape or leave to go home. And I believe our next scene here is we're cutting away to the prison. The Snout brothers, Gale and Evil, are escaping, and they're peering out of their tunnel of mud in the outside of the fences in the yard scene, and it's raining and it's dark and stormy. And Gale and Evil here, played by John Goodman and William Forsythe. Did you get a feel or a vibe that this was? I haven't seen Shawshank in so long, but was this similar to Shawshank, but just a lot louder? Mainly thanks to John Goodman.
Yeah. I was gonna say like this was like the prison break scene in Shawshank, just like on acid and amphetamines and shit. Like John Goodman tearing out of the ground there. I love John Goodman, man. He's a force. You're looking so young here.
Is he?
Yeah, I thought
he's a husky creature already here. He probably ate several creatures before this scene.
He's a big because he definitely had second breakfast and lunch on his way out of this hole here. He's a big boy. I think there were 4 inmates on their way, but only he and Evil made it out. I like this, like coming out of the ground like that was very cool imagery. And I'm watching this. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I see it's John Goodman. I'm like, okay, I buy it. It's John Goodman.
He's like Scotty from Star Trek. He seems to get bigger every time you see him on screen. Well,
he does get bigger every time you see him on screen.
It's like, I can't reach the controls, Captain.
He's one of those specimens that make you marvel at the survivability of the human body.
Yeah, like he's got good genes, man. He's that big and he hasn't, succumbed to about 5 billion heart attacks by now.
Yeah. Like a guy that big has all of the diabetes.
It's like Mr. Burns, It's like he has so many diseases that it can't get out the door and attack him. I don't know if you remember that scene.
I do, yeah. Not to make fun of John Goodman. I mean, the man is a very, very good actor and had a very successful career, and he's had some very good roles.
He's had a successful career.
Give me this.
He is okay. He's not a bad actor. He just plays the same thing over and over again.
No. That isn't the case at all, man. He's got more range in his admittedly huge little finger than Morgan Freeman's got in his whole body.
You're like comparing a rock to a rock with moss on it.
No. We're going to have to do a detailed examination of John Goodman's career one of these days because I dispute you, sir.
I haven't seen enough, but what I've seen of John Goodman is he plays the same fucking thing every time. And a lot of actors do. So that's what I mean. He's not a rare antiquity actor. Let's put it that way. That's all I'll say. But let's move on. Let's not get into...
Gotta have the last word, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, I know. I'm driving this thing. So next time you can do it. William Forsythe, let's talk about him. He is not a famous actor. Like, John Goodman's fairly famous, especially in comparison to William Forsythe. William Forsythe's more of a dirty character actor. This is, again, one of his earlier roles. What I found interesting is he doesn't act like anything that I've seen William Forsythe do since then.
Yeah.
He was very subdued, completely different. Yeah, they had the accent. He was talking and acting a lot differently. Is this a sign of good acting from William Forsythe?
I think you'd have to say so. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really even recognize him when I watched it until I kind of looked it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that guy, I've seen him in everything. And he's a very prolific actor. Still working today. And, he's been in everything, but as you say, he's a, prolific character actor. But yeah, I think he shows some talent here because this is not what we're used to seeing from him. And he does a good job.
I think so. Yeah, I think he does an okay job here too. So let's move on to the next scene here. Snoats, the brothers, they visit Hi and Evel. So we cut back to Hi and Ed's house, and this is their first night at home as a new family with their abducted child, and you get Hi showing Nathan Jr. all the luxuries of his mobile home. Well, there's a floor over there, there's a ceiling up here, or whatnot. and then their first night is interrupted as Gail and Evel pay Hi a visit and want to stay. So, Jeff, anything of value in these scenes? Do you like anything here?
Well, we're starting to get a little bit more with Holly Hunter's character, Ed. Yeah, I think this is kind of a cool scene. There's not a whole lot to take away here other than, we see Hi's prison roots, and that's creating a bit of a divide, even though Ed's no longer a police officer. Clearly this is causing a little bit of strife. But, we're just kind of moving the plot. This is a plot set up for later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's not much here. I found it cute and charming that Hi was, they're so desperate for kids. And, I'm a fairly recent new parent. I mean, my kids are 2, so 2 years is a long time, but it just feels like they were born yesterday. So I can recall what it's like. It's a special feeling no matter who you are and what status of living you have. You're always proud to bring the kids home and happy to show them around. So I found this scene, relatable and cute and charming, and still funny. And then again, yeah, this is mainly exposition and plot device because these guys are going to be foils for them a bit later. So that's why they're there. That's their presence and value to the movie. I also think, again, a sign of maybe the Coen Brothers saying he cannot escape his surrounding. He's a product of that society. So I found it interesting that in who Hi is, he cannot kick them out. He let them stay. So I found that interesting. So let's move to Hi's dream that night. So that night we get our first glimpse about the apocalyptic biker from hell. It seems to be a cross between Mad Max's Harry, Our Cousin, and Gibson's Braveheart character. I forget what it was. What was the name of the Braveheart character?
William Wallace.
William Wallace, right. So what are your thoughts about Hi's dream about the biker, and what does it signify to you? Is there anything of significance here?
Not knowing anything about it because I hadn't seen it before, way out of left field. I'm like, what is going on here? The apocalypse. I had the same thought, like it's Ghost Rider and Mad Max at the same time,
Yeah.
A very cool imagery. I'm like, what is going on here? This sort of supernatural element, or at least it feels that way sort of at first. But this is, again, something that, the Coens had used in some of their films later is almost a supernatural element here. But you know what? It perked me right up because it was out of left field. I'm like, okay, something else is going on here. That really grabbed me. I love the imagery. What does it symbolize? I mean, I don't know. I've been kind of wrestling with that. I mean, part of it, obviously, because he's seeing it in his dream. So is he having a premonition of some kind? Or is this, the signal to him that he can't keep going in the same circle that he's been going in his whole life? Mind you, he's already kind of broken that circle by getting married and then concocting the scheme to steal a kid. But I guess even then,
it's still a crime.
He's going right back into the circle just with different players. And this is the sign that world is coming to an end. So that's the apocalypse for him. right now is this imagery. I don't know if that plays itself out properly over the rest of the movie. We can talk about it as it comes along, but that's kind of how I was reading it.
Yeah, the notes I wrote down here when I first saw it, I mean, I do like some of the imagery here for sure. I thought it signified his, initial thoughts was signifying his subconscious guilt from his current crime of kidnapping the child and maybe all of his other crimes, his karma, the devil coming for him. He's going to get his comeuppance. So I thought maybe that might have been a sign there. It's also interesting, as I think you mentioned the word premonition. I found it interesting that maybe his dreams are coming true. We can touch on that later, any significance or not, because correct me if I'm wrong, does he not even dream here about the Mrs. Arizona, the real mom, finding that the baby is gone and then you see her screaming in this dream sequence? I can't recall.
There's a dreamlike shot, which I read a little bit about this shot, which is kind of like pieced together where she's screaming, like the camera comes up the ladder and into the room and she's screaming. And that kind of
that's the sequence.
Yeah. Is that part of his dream or is that real? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's both.
Maybe.
Because maybe he is actually having a premonition because obviously this horseman of the apocalypse does come true.
So maybe, so we can talk about that later. Maybe he's having premonitions about his future and things that are coming true. So let's move on. Then we cut to the next day in Nathan, Arizona. And, obviously because the wife realized that the baby was gone in that dream sequence. So in reality, that happens. So the next day we cut to the press conference with the real father, Nathan, Arizona. I just wanted to point out, the actor who plays Nathan, Arizona, I actually liked this guy a lot. He was pretty good in this role. I believe the actor's name is Trey Wilson, and he was supposed to be in the next Coen Brothers movie, which I believe was Miller's Crossing. But he died shortly before that of a brain hemorrhage, unfortunately. And it's too bad because I really like the actor here. I was saying, why haven't I seen this guy in other things? He seemed pretty good in this role. And what did you think about this character?
Yeah, I agree. I really liked him as well. I thought he was very good.
I love the way he was saying some things. It was so 80s, like, do it my way or watch your butt. It was like something out of Top Gun. It's like, I want some butts,
He had this sort of big fish in a small pond attitude about him, like Dennis Franz and Die Hard 2, Die Harder.
I love how you said Die Harder. Of course, you had to throw it in there.
That's the title of the movie. Die Hard 2, Die Harder.
I'm not bashing you, but I just love how you had to point it out. Die Harder, but it's okay. Let's move on.
No, but he was very good. I mean, it's taking, the tropes the stereotypes that we come to know. I mean, you got the small town. You sort of have this big Southern businessman who runs all this shit, and he's an unpainted furniture store is his claim to fame, and yet that's the big deal in this town is the unpainted furniture store magnate, and I found that humorous. And Trey Wilson did a really good job of, he's got a bit of bluster to him, but he's an idiot.
Yeah,
he's just as much an idiot as High.
Yeah.
Only he's got the money.
Well, I wouldn't.
In the organization.
I wouldn't go as far as saying he's as big as idiot as High. Yeah, he is a businessman. It doesn't even matter here. His baby's still gone, and he's still all about the plugging in an advertising spot for in front of the news, right? Yeah. So I think, and then the fact he became famous, it looks like he was, he did all that hard work himself. I wouldn't go as far as saying he's an idiot, but again, he's a product of that dim-witted mid-state society. Again, is that a commentary about American society? I don't know. But yeah, I did enjoy these scenes here. At least this press conference here, it was pretty funny. So then we cut to the next scene here. High and Ed with their new baby invite the High supervisor Glenn and Glenn's wife and kids over. The wife's name is Dot in the movie, and Dot's played by Frances McDormand. So they get together at their place at the mobile home, and here we see High starting to admit to Glenn being a bit overwhelmed and frustrated. So we see even have Dot starting to overwhelm Ed with all the responsibilities of parenthood. Kid has to have this, has to have that vaccine, and such and such. So you can definitely understand why High and Ed seem to be a bit overwhelmed. Naturally, all parents would be in the same spot when they're new parents. And then you have, but then you cut away to a weird thing. It is kind of straight out of left field is like Glenn's suggestion of doing a wife swap.
Yeah.
Because him and Dot are swingers. So that's just to keep things interesting because there ain't much else to do in these parts, I believe he says. So, and then Hyde decks him. So what did you think of these scenes here? Any thoughts? Did any of this work for you? Where does it fit in this movie? Like, what's going on here?
Well, I laughed. This is one of the few points in the movie where I laughed out loud because, again, they're a product of this environment and these people are who they are. But they're not swingers because they're sexually liberated or anything like that. They're fucking bored, Mm-hmm. And I found the humor there. And he, he's so appalled at this that he punches his lights out. And also they're so unappealing. Like these are the swingers and they're just a couple of like sort of homely looking desert dwellers. And there's just nothing like cool or sexy about it at all. It's like, oh, gross. So I thought it was funny, and it helped, again, it helps kind of like build this world around him where there's just nothing going on. And it's sort of an oddball way of reinforcing the setting and throwing a joke and a couple of quirky characters at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, these scenes really, I kind of feel a little bit differently than you do. I don't really get much from these scenes. I feel it's just filler. I guess the one thing that's demonstrated here, as I mentioned, that Hi and Ed are overwhelmed and unprepared. But I'm not sure if this is just a simple plot device for them to reconsider having the kid later, or is it something else? I'm not sure. These scenes here kind of slowed down the film for me a bit too much. It wasn't really that funny or interesting. I mean, I get where you kind of laugh at the fact that they're swingers because they're bored, but I don't think that's enough for me to justify these scenes. I don't like Glenn as a character. I mean, you're not meant to like him, but I just find that him and Dot and his later involvement in the film, which we'll get to, wasn't really needed in my opinion. But let's move on. I believe that evening they need to go. Hi and Ed are still a bit overwhelmed, and Ed tells Hi to stop at a convenience store to pick up some diapers. All of a sudden, Hi makes a decision to pull some pantyhose over his head and steal the diapers instead of paying for it. And then the acne-cladded cashier then triggers a silent alarm, and Ed sees what's happening from the outside and gets furious and drives away without Hi. And then we get a foot chase between Hi and the police, and you get the score perking up again with the yodeling and the banjos, and the police are shooting at him, and he manages somehow to keep going without getting shot, ducking in and out of the houses in the neighborhood. And we even get a strange dog stampede somehow. It's kind of like Rocky 2, only with dogs instead of children. So they just join in for the fun. So what did you make of this whole thing here, Geoff? Did you like these scenes here?
Yeah, actually, for the most part, I did. I mean, I did think it was funny that he can't even buy the diapers. He has to steal them. Like, that was the impression. Like, he walked in there. There was no question in his mind that he was going to steal these diapers and the money in the till, because.
But why? So that's my question. Why?
Because that's who he is. That's what he does. It's the same as me, like buying gas at the gas station. Is just do it.
Okay, but
that's how he played it.
But I have to make the logical assumption that when he got married to Ed, there was a period of time while they were trying to get pregnant. He had a legitimate job at a machine shop. He was getting a paycheck. Things were hunky-dory, and they were paying for everything normally. He was living a clean life. So why here all of a sudden does he decide to spontaneously steal these diapers? He wasn't stealing them before. I've got to make that assumption. That's the logical conclusion that one would, or interpretation that one would have here previously, since he got engaged and married. He was clean until this point. So why did he do it here?
I guess there's two possibilities here. Either one, he has been stealing, we just haven't seen it.
I don't buy that.
Or two, he's overwhelmed. Like, everything's just blowing him away. The kid, Ed's kind of going over the top on him. He's got his buddy's busted out of prison. They just beat this guy up for suggesting a wife swap. And he's like, fuck this. I'm going back to my roots here. And I'm going with what I know.
Yeah. And that's
so that would be the other explanation.
And that's where
that's probably the right explanation, but I love how he plays it. Like, he's nonchalant about this. He's just, he's going to steal the diapers.
But that's the brilliance of Cage. The Cage, I should say.
The Cage.
The Cage.
Yeah, it's not Cage. It's the Cage.
Cage.
Yeah. Nicholas T. Cage.
Nicholas the Cage.
It's like William T. Riker, the Riker.
Yeah, the Riker. No. I joked around.
There's a spirit animal.
I don't know if I recall telling you this. I joked around with my wife. I said, when we have kids, they should be named the. Because then they can call themselves anything they want. The Flash. The Cage. Whatever.
Yeah.
She vetoed it right away, but I think it works.
You have girls, though. I don't know that it quite works.
I'll ask them when they're 18.
There's too much trouble there, I think. I think you're asking for too much trouble there. I can't imagine how your wife shot that down there. Did you put the Cage in front of her when you made the suggestion?
I should have. I should have
gestured to a photo of him. A photo that I know you have.
I should always have a cardboard standout of Nicolas Cage at the entrance to my house.
I figured you had one next to your bed.
No, but giving me ideas here. So
there's a rude awakening in the middle of the night, going to get a glass of water. Oh, Jesus.
So anyways, anything else you want to say here?
I do think it, I mean, it was the pantyhose is, it's funny. Like, he he makes it funny as well. Again, going back to Cage, equal parts, hilarity, like unaware humor where, he doesn't think it's funny. The characters think it's funny, but it's obviously played for laughs. The nonchalantness of the robbery here, and the chase scene for some reason evoked the epic chase scene in True Detective season 1, where they're just going through all the households and stuff.
Oh, I thought you were going to say The Rock.
The Rock. We really got to put The Rock. We got to do The Rock on this show, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I laughed. I thought it was funny. The cops are played for dupes as well, and I kind of like how it finishes, where it's like, okay, he's just giving her directions after that, like just left up here, and they're like yelling, screaming at each other. Yeah, you take her right up here, and then leans out, grabs the diapers like a boss. I thought this was, I thought it was funny action scene here. It doesn't do a whole lot to move the plot along, but one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why they threw it in here. You needed something to perk the audience up a little bit and get the energy going, because there's not a lot of high energy. But even though I wouldn't say this chase is a high energy chase, it was just something to perk the audience up. So I understand why they did it here. I like Nicolas Cage himself in these scenes. He does look somewhat at home with the pantyhose over his head, holding a package of Huggies in one arm and a gun in the other. So I like that. I like that image.
He looks at home. He just looks at home.
It's like when Troutman says to Rambo, he went home. or no, whatever. I wanted to make mention of some of the cinematography here, some of the camera work. I think there's some where the credit goes to Barry Sonnenfeld instead of the Coens here, with that point of view shot from the dogs is that lower point of view as they're chasing high through the houses. But I found the humor here, if they're trying to go for humor, it wasn't that great. We can make jokes about Nicolas Cage, and that's where I kind of enjoyed it a bit more. It was more the Cage himself. I mean, I guess there's the satirical comedy about the police just shooting at him, even though he just stole some diapers. So shoot first, no matter what the crime. Commentary on America's society and obsession with guns and violence, and maybe the mid or southwestern states or mid states. I'm not sure if there is a commentary here or not. Is it also a commentary or joke about how family life can get you bogged down and just gets you into trouble? So I'm not sure here. The message is a bit unclear if there's a message at all, but I kind of mixed on these scenes myself. But overall, again, as I mentioned, it's nice to have a bit more of an up-tempo scene. So this is right here. And at the end of this moment here, Ed mentions to Hai that they probably should break up, because she's not going to have him committing crimes while she's raising a kid. So she wants none of this. So this is kind of, and then they go home, as you mentioned. I think he was giving directions or something like that. And everything was just kind of silent and a little bit depressing at the end of this. But this is kind of the end of Act 2. So Jeff, what are your thoughts so far with this movie? Is it engaging you? Are you with the story? Are you with the characters here? What's working for you or not working for you at this point?
Well, I mean, the highlight so far, Nicolas Cage is carrying this on his back. He is delivering the Coens dialogue with a lot of style. He's got some balls here. He's selling the dialogue. I mean, the Coens can be very intricate with their dialogue, and it takes the right people to carry it. So I think he's doing a good job. Holly Hunter is not working for me at all. There isn't much character development with her. There's no chemistry, unfortunately, between Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter, in my opinion. So that's a big drag on the movie here, because the whole premise is these two opposites have attracted each other, across this chasm of Law and Order. And she just kind of turns into a bit of a stereotypical shrew. She doesn't have any dimension. And that bugged me. It's a little sexist. So that's bugging me. The supporting players are working for me. John Goodman's working for me. Frances McDormand always works for me. I think that she's a fantastic actor. Our Ghost Rider, bounty hunter, Leonard Smalls, is also, we got some interesting imagery here. So I like to believe that, something else is cooking under the surface. But also, for a comedy, for me, it's not funny enough.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with you for the most part. I mean, the Nicolas Cage is definitely so far the highlight. Also, I like the dialogue. Some of the dialogue here, the score, some of the imagery is really good here, but it's kind of a mixed bag so far because I'm expecting it to be a bit more funny. And I agree. I think the chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter, I think Holly Hunter's fine in the role. It's just the story and the dialogue and the scenes, it's not focused on them enough, surprisingly.
Yeah.
That I found surprising. And that's where I question some of the presence of these other characters. I'm wondering if it would have been a bit more of a tight movie and more effective if you kind of eliminated some of these other storylines, gave a little bit more screen time to just Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter themselves.
I completely agree with that, for sure. Yeah.
Let's go back to the house here. So Huggy, five-finger discount, she suggests they shouldn't be together anymore. So they head back to their mobile home, and the Snow brothers still trying, and they actually manage to convince Hi to join them in robbing a bank, I believe the next day or day after, or something like that. So he believe here is where Hi writes a goodbye letter to Ed. But the next morning, before he can go anywhere, his supervisor Glenn comes to visit and tells Hi he knows the truth about the kid. He realizes it's Nathan Jr. and he threatens to go to the cops. But I do have a question for you here, Jeff. I was a bit confused at the scene and wondering if you can clarify something. Did Glenn want the kid for himself? And why? Was it to add to his family, or did he want to have the reward from Nathan Sr. here? I was a bit confused.
Yeah, it was a little creepy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought he wanted the kid for himself for some reason.
It's almost like he had, like the baby has some kind of holy grail quality that all these people are after him. All these people want him for different reasons. I don't know if he wanted it for the money or not. He was a bit of a creeper, this dude.
Yeah, I was a bit confused. And again, I think that's where a bit this movie drops the ball here, some of these side storylines here. But the one thing that this conversation does have here is when Gail and Evel overhear this conversation with Hi and Glenn and realize that this is a kidnapped baby, Nathan Jr., and when Hi returns, they tie him up, get into a fight and tie him up and steal the baby themselves so they can claim the reward for themselves. So the question I have here, Jeff, is we get a bit of a fight here between Hi and the brothers here. Do you find these scenes well filmed? What's your impression here?
I didn't take a lot of note on these scenes here. They worked okay, but I again, like at this point in the third act, I mean, we're getting some more action, and it just doesn't feel like it's that kind of a movie, or it hasn't been that kind of a movie to this point.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they're throwing this stuff in here. So I find the tone here a bit uneven.
It's a shift in tone. So that hurts. Yeah.
It hurts. But the one thing I did like about this sequence is Nicolas Cage and his facial expressions as he's fighting and getting beaten up, and his hair is on like different angles and staying up straight. And then, he goes to the one side and the hair goes somewhere else, and goes the other side, the hair goes somewhere else. So it's like an animal onto itself. Maybe it was an animal. I'm not sure.
Well, it probably was an animal, because how method Nick Cage is. He's like, we're putting a real beast on my head here. It's also a little too slapstick.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, it's a bit too silly and slapstick here.
And that doesn't really fit with that slapstick is not in the Coen's wheelhouse, I don't think.
Yeah, so I'm wondering maybe if this is something of inexperience. It's their second movie, and I guess their first one was dark, and they wanted to go something light and goofy here. So they did this, and maybe their inexperience, or maybe they took some lessons learned from this movie and then honed their filmmaking skills later.
Yeah, and that's maybe that's something maybe we can talk about when we wrap up the film.
So let's move on. So the next scene here is the brothers have taken Nathan Jr. I guess they're on their way to claim the reward, but all of a sudden they strangely fall in love with Nathan Jr. Just because I guess the baby smiled at one of them, and now they call him Gale Jr. And then I guess I can't remember the exact steps, but then all of a sudden they realize he isn't in the car, and they think they placed him on the roof. So they go back to maybe a rest stop or something, and they almost run him over on the road, and all they're doing is screaming over and over and over again. It feels kind of like a Jim Carrey movie at this point. It's just all of a sudden all they're doing is just screaming. And I even think this is repeated a second time, again, after the bank robbery. So I guess the question I have for you is, I think you already answered this in a sense, is this kind of humor common for the Coen brother films? Because I didn't find it funny here at all. I'm assuming it's not, based on what you've said, but any comment here?
Yeah. It's definitely more slapstick than or over the top, so that I wouldn't say that is a Coen characteristic. I like the bank robbery. I thought that was. I thought that was.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that. So let's leave the bank robbery out. I just wanted to know about them leaving the kid over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, we've all left shit on the roof of our cars, I guess. So I guess that's the joke. But so
that's
what?
The joke. You suck, McBain.
You suck, McBain. Asshole.
So, meanwhile, while this is happening, that bounty hunter we were talking about, Leonard Smalls, he visits Nathan Arizona Sr. himself. And so we get a first real look at the big biker bounty hunter dude. And I like it funny on his way there. It's funny he has an obsession for killing rabbits. I like some of this imagery here. Kind of reminded me of the movie Rubber. Did you watch Rubber? No. So no. I did watch that for one of those Halloween nights, just watching a silly, typical horror movie. You can call it a horror movie. Just his tires just going around killing rabbits. Strange. It just vibrates and the rabbits explodes. It's like this guy looks at the rabbit the wrong way and it explodes or something. So I found that kind of funny. But I like the scene between Nathan Sr. and this guy. I thought it was a strong scene. That's why I like the actors playing Nathan Sr. Trey Wilson, because he's right on to this guy right away. And I like some of the cinematography here of the bike exhaust and the doom and gloom surrounding the bounty hunter. So maybe we can get into it a bit. I'll ask this question later, but did you like this scene overall between these two guys? I
actually did. Yeah, I actually liked this scene. I thought it was good character interaction here. Both actors did a good job. I guess the only thing that it's hard to say for sure, because the bounty hunter is brought down to earth a little bit because of this conversation. And I liked him more as the symbol that he's been so far. And, now he's just...
Can you elaborate on that? Like, how did he change?
Okay, so our first introduction to this demon bounty hunter is in High's Nightmare, right? So we get the apocalyptic vision of this crazy, and I said, horseman of the apocalypse, motorcycle man of the apocalypse, with the crossed shotguns strapped to his back. And I mean, he's a herald of doom and destruction, of bad shit coming down, which I loved. I love that imagery. And again, as I said, it kind of symbolizes the apocalypse of High's old world. But as it turns out, he's just a guy, hard living, rough mofo for sure, who will mess up your shit by looking at you wrong and blow up some rabbits. But he wants the, whatever the reward, 25 grand. And that's pretty much it. Right. So I think that undercuts the strong imagery and symbolism of the nightmare. He's just a guy who rides a motorcycle and looks really scary.
As you said, maybe it would have been better if it was actually Ghost Rider himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a flaming mustache or some shit would have been great. Yeah.
Still played by Nicolas Cage. I'm talking about the biker. I'm talking about the mustache.
Oh, the mustache played by Nicolas Cage.
Yes.
Yeah, I could see it.
So then after this, I guess Leonard Smalls kind of gets, I forget how he gets a sense. He gets a sense that maybe there would be a bank robbery involving High, so he kind of heads over there, and then we actually get to the bank robbery here with Gail and Evel. And do they actually bring the baby inside with them? I believe they do, don't they?
Yeah, I thought they did. Did they not?
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah. Stand-up parents. I love it here. So.
Yeah, they're bang-up guys. Yeah, they're naturals, really.
So you said you enjoyed the bank robbery scene. So you care to tell us why?
It felt like before, like they got this big plan to knock off this bank. And they basically walk in there like a couple of idiots, and they can't even, again, it's sort of the sophisticated redneck there. It's like, everybody freeze, get down on the ground. And the one guy's like, okay,
not you.
Which do you want?
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of funny. They can't even pull off a simple bank robbery right from the start. They're idiots. And they go up to get the cash, and like all the bank tellers, where are the bank tellers? Like, well, you told us to get on the ground. They can't figure the fucking thing out. And then obviously the whole thing goes to shit because they got the dye pack, which explodes in the car later. I thought it was funny. I mean, I like seeing John Goodman play a moron, I guess. He's really good at it.
Yeah, he's not bad at it. I just feel that these scenes are just... I just don't understand the purpose of why these characters and these scenes are here to begin with. So again, is this just filler?
I think it's not so much. Yeah.
I think because I don't know, I don't really present too much of a foil for High. I mean, I guess they're just a reminder of his past and his temptation to be still a criminal. His habitual temptation there. He's a product of his surroundings. So. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of the bank robbery here. I get that they're a bunch of morons and rednecks and don't know what's going on. So, Yeah, they don't pay enough attention, and the cashier throws in the anti-theft die, and it explodes as they leave, and they forget the kid again. They start screaming, and then the die explodes, and they crash their car, and then they're pretty much written out of the movie at that point. Yeah. And then we get to the showdown between Hi, Ed, and the bounty hunter, because Hi knows that they're probably heading to the bank, so they head there. The bounty hunter's there, and then you get this showdown. Let me know what your thoughts here about the fight between Hi and the bounty hunter and that little chase.
Well, I think we're getting kind of what's emblematic of the problems with the third act here is we're getting these weird action scenes with the bank robbery and which again doesn't really have much purpose in advancing the plot. It's just, it's played for some gags. We're losing the character-driven events of earlier in the film. Now it's the plot-driven events. I thought it was kind of cool how Nicolas Cage channeling his future roles as that dude in The Rock or Con Air. He just takes the pin out of the grenades and
pulls a Rambo
blows
3.
That dude to smithereens. Yeah, pulls a Rambo 3, exactly.
I think Rambo pulled it off a bit better, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, without Nicolas Cage going with the messed up face and stuff, it doesn't quite have the Sly Stallone quality that we'd come to know and love. So the scene is, it's a letdown for me because shit's just happening and it's wrapping stuff up. Where's the revelation, I wasn't meant to be a parent, or wasn't meant to be a parent yet, or, my connection with this baby that I kidnapped, or my connection with, my wife who's my polar opposite, or, I'm doing battle with the thing that's come to destroy my life, my life, my old world is ending and I'm doing battle with that. Where's the relevance of that? Where's the thrust of all that shit that's been building? It's just gone now.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think maybe this bounty hunter, instead of going after the kid, he could have been maybe missed a parole board meeting, or a meeting with his parole officer. So then they call in the bounty hunter to bring him in for a meeting. And that's the battle. That's where that fight goes. It's not about the bounty hunters after the baby. It's again just about his previous life. And they could have focused a bit more instead of this bank robbing scenes and the stuff with the Snotes brothers and all those things. It was just more Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter, Hi and Ed. And maybe they could have had some interesting humor of them attempting to raise this child as their own. And they were struggling with it. It would have been a different type of comedy altogether and maybe less witty. I think maybe here the Coen brothers were trying to look at more witty dialogue. They were forcing that here a bit too much, but it didn't feel natural to the characters. And I don't think it serviced Hi and Ed enough. With respect to this last fight scene, we talked about the Rambo 3 style grenade pin pull. A couple of low, interesting shots, point of view angles again from Barry Sonnenfeld, and with the chase with the motorcycle and the baby on the hood of the motorcycle there. It's kind of a little strange and a bit weird, but maybe that's part of this weird world that the Coen brothers are trying to paint. But the one thing I did notice here is that I think Hi was dragged from under a car, and that was the same point of view angle when the bounty hunter was dragging him out as when Hi was dragging the baby out of the crib at the beginning of the movie. So kind of became full circle there. I made a note of that. Let's move on. So then they return the baby to realize that, they're not well-suited parents. This isn't for them. Probably going to split up. So they take the baby, Nathan Jr., back. Same way they break in the second floor window through the ladder. Then as they're saying goodbye to the baby, when they put him back in the crib, Nathan Sr. catches them and then doesn't call the police. They explain that they just wanted to have a kid and they couldn't have a kid naturally and all that stuff, or can't adopt. So he understood. And then they were mentioning that they're going to break up, and he tells them to sleep on it before breaking up. Is this good advice or commentary on the type of social behavior in nowhere Arizona? What was that here? And then talk about Hi's dream ending and stuff like that. So what are your comments here?
I didn't get the feeling that, why did they take the kid back? Was it because they realized what they did was wrong, or is it because they could see that they weren't ready to be parents? Which both. Was it? I don't. I think it's both. I didn't get either. Though. You know what I mean?
But I think the events of the movie, especially with the bounty hunter chasing them and the kid constantly being kidnapped out of their hands and other people chasing him, they can't escape that. It's not their kid. In addition, they realize they cannot be together. They're thinking of splitting up. So that's why they're returning it. There's two reasons here. They're not ready.
Yeah.
But then that's why they said sleep on it. So then he has his dream sequence. So then what do you think of that?
Well, that kind of brings the the dream sequence full circle. So the first dream sequence where we have the demon bounty hunter, where his old world is destroyed. And now we're coming around to what rises out of the ashes of the destruction of his old world, which is, presumably the dream, the family that, 2-3 generations worth of family sitting around the Thanksgiving table, which is great. It's just, so what? But, for me at that point, I didn't feel like they actually wanted that life badly enough for that dream sequence to have any relevance to me. I mean, maybe there's a certain element of, that's the future. That's when we are ready, it will happen for us, I suppose, is what he's seeing there. So, not to be impulsive and just take it from now, but be patient and live life. I suppose you could interpret some of that in that dream sequence. So, it's a kind of a heartwarming way to sort of wrap everything up and let everything's going to be okay. But yeah, I don't know, it just didn't really work for me.
Didn't work for you. Okay. No, for me, I like the ending. It did work for me. Again, as you said, it's heartwarming to see that. Yeah, as I mentioned, I think the Coens, they were looking for something a bit more optimistic. So you mentioned that we talked about his dreams, maybe he's having premonitions of something coming true. His subconscious telling him something is coming. And then, as you said, have patience, work at it. That's why he said sleep on it, be together, try and work on it a bit more. And then we talk about his final sentence in the movie when he wakes up from his dream and he says, hey, maybe his current surroundings are not a good place for being good people or raising a family. And then he goes, maybe Utah. So I found that funny. That was a funny line. And I also think that, again, going back to his in and out of revolving door prison life, he's a byproduct of that poor Midwest or Southwest, whatever you want to classify it. Nowhere, dumb little place, hick town, neighborhood. There's nothing there. There's nothing to do. He has no education, nothing else to offer. And he's just sucked into this life, and he's a byproduct of the society and the surroundings around him. So maybe then he says, maybe things will change if I move. So yeah. I found that kind of a funny, interesting way. And maybe is that a lesson in life? Something's not working for you here. Don't give up. Pick yourself up. Go somewhere else. Try again. Try harder. Maybe is that the optimistic message that the Coen brothers are trying to convey here? That's kind of how I'm interpreting it here. Coen brothers are, in my research here, that apparently they're very, very hesitant, and they do not like to give out any hints of what the commentary and the messages they're trying to convey in their movies. It's really up to the audiences here. Is there a message here? That's kind of what I got from it.
I think that, we've talked about it, where all these people, like, they are who they are, and they're stuck in this cycle, whether it's, the most obvious one obviously is High and the revolving door prison, and he's going through the same thing. Same with Ed, she's doing the same thing where she's processing these crooks who keep coming in and in and in, and she's doing the same thing. Really, everybody's stuck in the same path. They're on rails, and the rails run in a circle. But they are, these people are who they are. They can't escape it. And that's the whole movie. And the optimistic ending is, symbolically changing location. I mean, it's not so much about changing physical, geographic location in the real world. It's more like changing the location of your mindset, your psyche, your chi, whatever you want to call it, to get off of those rails and to get to somewhere, and having the patience to ride that new path. Because what you want is at the end of that, not in the old ways. So I think that's all there.
Maybe this is a commentary about family life in America, or the state of society in modern times. I mean, divorce rates are very high. It's very easy. And I find, hard to say and hard to comment. It depends on the situation, but I would just put a simple guess out there that people maybe break up a bit too easy because it's a little simple to do. It's so easy to do now. Instead of working to resolve the problems the hard way, people take the easy way out, split up, or get divorced. Maybe they're commenting about something like that here as well.
I think you're absolutely right, man. I totally agree. And that's sort of epitomized by that line, where he says, sleep on it before you decide to do anything. It's, have the patience and, work on it. Don't do anything rash. Because that's all they did the whole movie, was they did something rash. That's his whole life, is just reacting. Hopefully learn to not just react, but to think, to contemplate, and then act proactively, right? That's part of when I said at the start, with a lot of Coen Brothers films is, they're like the magicians, like, look over here at all this, funny, zany stuff that's going on. And then they come underneath with this kind of thing, whether it's the heartwarming message that we get here, the optimistic message, or, some of the other shit that goes down in their other movies. That's one of the strengths of the film is it is trying to get you a little bit deeper. There's more here than just some of the zaniness that kind of broke the third act for us. I think that is one of the things that does work for me is you could kind of feel that optimism. But I kind of wanted another laugh.
Well, yeah, I can understand. So then why don't we get into our final thoughts here, Geoff? So overall, what is your thoughts of Raising Arizona? Does it meet your standards of the other Coen brother movies that you enjoy? Where does this rank maybe in terms of the ones that you've seen? And how do you view this movie overall? Is it a recommendation for you? Is it a rare antiquity? What are its strengths and weaknesses? And be careful. The Cage may be listening.
The Cage may be listening. We'll come to The Cage last, I think. If we take a look at this as a Coen Brothers film, I think we can see some of the inexperience with, new filmmakers here, as being their second film. It definitely has some of those, lower budget, inexperienced filmmaker type of qualities to it. It feels a little bit thrown together. And from a plot perspective, it's not that tight. Their later movies, when it comes to plot, a lot of their movies are very, very tight when it comes to plot and character. And this is a little loose, but it's kind of cool to see. I mean, does it fit the standards of my favorite Coen films? No, not even close. But it is cool to see the seeds of some of those things that they will do later in some of their really excellent films. We can talk about the performances a little bit. Nicolas Cage is fantastic. He's the highlight of the film here. What was really interesting, because I hadn't seen this before, you kind of get this image of Nicolas Cage burned into your mind from the modern Cage. He's like a bag of cats. He's, his eyes are all over the place and he's crazy. But he isn't really like that in this movie. No. He's straight calm in this movie. Fucking Holly Hunter is the one who's batshit crazy in this movie. He's the one, he's playing it cool pretty much the whole time. She's the one who's losing her shit. And I didn't enjoy her performance. I mean, she did fine. I think she's a good actor as well, but the character, I think, was underwritten. Just speaking broadly about all of the characters, and this is another thing that we see with some of the Coen Brothers stuff, is their characters are often painted with broad strokes. Like each character kind of represents something. They don't have, I don't want to say they don't have a lot of nuance, but they're almost, I don't know what the right term is. They're almost cartoon characters in a good way. Like they have specific representations that they're, trying to figure out. It's not like these aren't normal people in a normal world, right? They're exaggerations. They're like funhouse mirror reflections, which is a good thing. I think that's a strength here. Overall, is this a recommendation for me? Are we talking about Rare Antiquities at this point?
We split it. Is it just a recommend? Can modern audiences get into this? And then is it also a rare antiquity?
Okay. I'm on the fence. I'm leaning towards no. I think there is a lot here to like, but for modern audiences, it's just not quite tight enough. It's a little rough around the edges. So, I think just taking it on its own, it might have to skip this one. I know it's very well reviewed and has, in the minds of most critics and viewers, it's aged like fine wine over time. I kind of take the opposite viewpoint. So no. And then, is this a rare antiquity?
Has to be a no then, right?
It has to be a no, right? I mean, it wants to be. It's the type of movie that wants to be what we're looking for in a rare antiquity, but I don't think that it quite gets there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm so on the fence, and actually I'm liking the movie more as we've talked about it just here on the podcast. I'm enjoying some of the layers that we've discussed, and my initial reaction watching it for the podcast is I'm saying, what is this? I mean, I like Nicolas Cage. I like some of the imagery. I like the dialogue. I like some of the bits of the score. But when we're talking about some of the layers and the messages underneath, especially at the end, I'm enjoying some of that a bit more as we've talked about it. And it's almost getting me to a point where I can recommend the movie, and I would. The only problem is the middle and the bulk of the third act. I find there's not enough there that is strong enough ethically give it a recommendation. As much as I want to.
Well, we don't want to be committing any war crimes here, man. So let's just say ethically speaking.
Yeah. But as you said, The Cage is fantastic. This is what he is capable of doing. It's a quirky, honest, soulful performance by Nicolas Cage. Top notch.
Yeah.
It's one of the stronger performances in probably most of the podcasts we've done, in my opinion. Very good and very subdued, but it's strong. It's very good. I feel for High, especially after talking about it a lot more. As a guy who's just stuck in a rut, can't get out. Yep. The other characters, not so much. I mean, I did enjoy William Forsythe a bit. I think John Goodman's just John Goodman. Okay, but nothing new here, even though it's one of his earlier roles. And again, as I mentioned, the character of Gail and Evel are just wasted, and they kind of drag the movie down. All the scenes with them really don't bring anything to the table for me. And I think the movie would have served better of eliminating them completely, maybe even Glenn and Dot too. Or they could have just had the one scene with them kind of pressuring them with all the responsibilities of being a parent, and that would have been it. And I think the movie should have focused more on High and Ed and their relationship and maybe their struggles with being a parent. The relationship between High and Ed is not strong enough, unfortunately. And I think that's really where the movie fails. And I cannot give it a recommendation based on that. But I love the beginning. I love the ending. I love some of the dialogue. I love bits of the score. Very appropriate, as we talked about. It's too bad. I wish, as you said, I think if it was tighter story and a little bit more funnier and a little bit more of a witty dialogue instead of some of the slapstick stuff, I think this could have definitely gone into your rare antiquity territory. It's too bad.
Yeah, it is too bad.
Any other thoughts or?
No, I mean, I kind of felt the same as you. I liked it more as we started talking about it on the episode here. So it is kind of a shame. It's nice to find those layers, but yeah, it's kind of a shame it wasn't quite enough.
I do find it strange that this movie does get a lot of very positive reviews as time has moved on. I'm wondering if this is the typical rose-tinted backdoor slamming stuff of the Coen brothers being a little bit more successful and famous now that people will just give them a pass on anything.
I do think you're right, though. I think there's some Coen brothers love that's and goodwill that's sort of backwashing through time on this here. I completely agree with that.
So that does it for today's episode, Raising Arizona, episode 14. So Geoff, what do you have in store for us next?
My penchant for cerebral science fiction will continue next week as we go back in time and go back in time again and go back in time again with the 2004 indie effort Primer.
It sounds familiar. Who's in this one?
Nobody you have ever heard of.
Primer.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've heard of this movie. I can't recall if I've seen it. So yeah, interesting choice. That'll be good.
Yeah, I think that'll be a cool discussion. I got to get a couple of notebooks because it's going to take a lot to deconstruct this sucker.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will see you next time. Cheers. Thanks for doing this, and it was fun.
All right, man. We'll see you next time.
All right. Cheers.